Hello, everyone, and welcome to Cut and Splice. This is Matt, and as usual, I'm joined with the co-hosts, Gil and Jason. Hello.
Hey,
Hey.
Hey, how's it going?
And this time around, we are going to be talking about two movies of the same franchise, which is debatable. Star Trek. One is the universally loved, lauded, and respected Wrath of Khan. The other is the latest cinematic installment by Justin Lin, Star Trek Beyond, which obviously received mixed reactions among trekkers and noobs alike. So we thought we would dive in, uh, compare, contrast, and analyze what we saw. So I'll kick it over to the guys. But you guys have the first word.
the first one's better.
The older one.
That's my takeaway.
I was actually not far off with my rating between them. So, but I definitely didn't want to give them the same rating. That would be weird. That would upset a lot of people. But I would like to say that I mean, as far as the critics, the Metascore is identical. They're both 68 on IMDb. The audience score is like 7.7 to 7.0. So does Wrath of Khan does take the upper hand there, but the critics seem to like not completely hate Star Trek Beyond. So that's something to point out.
Really?
Well,
Yeah, I
critics
mean,
are morons. If
yeah, I know critics have various reasons for leaning one way or another. I gotta say, I mean, personally, I don't know if it's just been a while since I've seen some of the newer Star Trek movies, and this is the first time I saw Star Trek Beyond because after the first two, I just kind of like just wasn't interested in seeing the third one. But especially because I heard it was directed by the guy who directed the Fast and Furious movies, is like, what the hell does that have anything to do with anything?
yeah.
Um, but I actually think it was a little refreshing compared to the first two. Like I felt like it was
Well, I'll agree with
it's
refreshing.
yeah, I mean like I think I mean obviously it was like his first movie in the franchise, so he wanted to put a stamp on it. And it seems like they wanted to have some touches of like Star Trek in there. And maybe this is one thing that could lead into the whole discussion is of the issue of Star Trek and movies in general, and I think we brought this up before, that Star Trek really is more suitable for TV than movies. Because when I think about it, Wrath of Khan is considered by most, aside from First Contact, like to be like to be a close second, maybe to be the best Star Trek movie that was made, and it's not really it's got touches, it's got moments in it that have to do with Western philosophy on all these things that are like put on like the whole original series. But it's not. It's just that I think what Star Trek was supposed to be as a TV show doesn't work as a movie because it has to have bigger, better, more adventure, more action, which was brought with a bang, with the new franchise. And I'm kind of looking at Wrath of Khan as like, except for like the better characters and characterization by the performers, like there's definitely that part of it like is better in the original cast. But as far as the movie itself, it's like a revenge story. It's got the little like First Contact, it's got a little bit of the Moby Dick thing thrown in there, just from the
The other
bad
way
guy's
around.
perspective.
Yeah.
The other way around, instead of Picard, it's like Khan that has like a complex with Kirk. Um, and it's good. It's good. It's not bad. It's just that it's all just touches, but I don't feel like there's an overarching, you know, um, profound thing that any of these movies is trying to do. I think some of them did, and then it failed. Like so it just feels like that Star Trek is kind of doomed to just not be able to do that much with a movie because they have to be so involved in the action and the adventure of it. I think it's like a little bit. I'm not saying it's. I think it's doable. We've seen like very interesting, sophisticated science fiction done even on a big scale, like Interstellar and other ones. But it just seems like Star Trek is just, I don't know, because it's like a franchise or something, and it's a big gamble. It's just I haven't seen a Star Trek movie with like real balls like that succeeded. I mean, I think Insurrection had like a bit of a concept in it, like a philosophical concept. Generations, I've always been fond of. I found that to be interesting, but it had other issues with it. So I just don't know. I know that the fourth Star Trek, the one with saving the whales, had like some interesting aspects to it. But even that,
The Voyage Home.
The Voyage Home, yeah. I mean, it's, but neither of them. Like, if I had to say like which was my favorite content that came out of Star Trek, they were mostly be some of the standout episodes from the original series from TNG and some of the ones from maybe Deep Space Nine. As far as like the best content, like if you told me like which ones you can't live without, it would be some of those episodes. It wouldn't be Wrath of Khan. I would eliminate Khan before I would eliminate some of my favorite episodes from the TV shows.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I largely agree. I mean, I've kind of jokingly said over the years that Star Trek, in a lot of ways, is like the Bible for atheists. Like you get moral homilies every week. You get some kind of a moral story and a complex idea once a week, and then you move on to the next adventure. You move on to this next big idea, this next moral quandary. And so, yeah, in a lot of ways, I do think that Star Trek suffers from that in terms of the cinematic format. That said, I mean, I think that, one thing that Wrath of Khan had was a story that made sense. I mean, even though, granted, every Trekker knows that Space Seed happened before Chekhov was on the Enterprise, and so that whole sequence with Chekhov and, like and Khan recognizing him doesn't actually make a whole lot of sense. But
after Space Seed, is there like an actual introductory episode with Chekhov, or did he just show up in an episode at some point? Does the crew acknowledge that this guy appeared on the Enterprise? Because it's not like that weird to assume that he was there, it just because he didn't play a big part, just because he wasn't on the show yet.
Right, he could have been promoted to a bridge officer.
Yeah.
In the meantime, that actually makes sense. But
that's the way I've always looked at it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. Thank you. That poses a major problem that I've had with Wrath of Khan for a long time. But the bottom line is Wrath of Khan. It is a cohesive, coherent, and also fairly powerful story, and there are elements in it, character elements, that beyond just tried to usurp, and it didn't have. I mean, just like Into Darkness tried to steal the Khan moment and tried to, like swap out, Spock's death scene with Kirk, and completely squandered that. They tried to lift out that entire scene with Bones and Kirk on Kirk's birthday.
Yeah, totally lifted.
Bones gives him, the spectacles, and he's getting older, and does Kirk really know like where his life is going now that he's not exploring the galaxy, now that he's an admiral, now that he's and so on and so forth. And they try to do that same thing in Beyond. The only problem is Chris Pine was like 38 years old or something when they made.
Yeah, no, it's a bit generally
Stupid.
like that was the problem with the first movie. It was like a teenage enterprise. Like they all just like
Yeah.
get to these positions very, very young.
Yeah,
That's definitely the problem with the first movie.
Yeah, I mean,
they just tried to rush all the and that's another problem with the Jar Jar Star Treks is that they did decide to just go straight cinema with it rather than basing it off of any series or anything. Well, I mean, they base it off of the series, but they base it off of a series by retconning the series, and just like reimagining everything, and so like everything's just thrown at you. I mean, like I. I mean, last, sorry, the other day was my first, no, yesterday was probably my 50th time watching Wrath of Khan.
Wow.
And I still cried. I still cried when Spock died. I mean, when they tried to do the same thing with Kirk in Into Darkness, again, you would have to take.
I was just rolling my eyes.
It's just
you were not crying.
No.
The opposite of crying.
Just in case we actually have anyone listen to this podcast who is not a regular viewer or listener, just so you know, to put some context to this, Matt is very fond of showing his displeasure with the filmmaker J.J. Abrams by referring to him as Jar Jar. Which is obviously a reference to one of the most hated characters in all of science fiction history, but which has nothing directly to
fantasy.
do with Star Trek, of course. But that is what he does, and that is what he will continue to do. I'm certain. So just throwing that out there.
okay.
I will say I was surprised when the credits like rolled. That Simon Pegg had a writing credit, and I don't think he did on the first two.
No, he did not.
So, and I found that interesting because I did feel like there's like a bit more touch of Star Trek spirit in this one than other ones. And one of the reasons why I wanted to see Into Darkness is because I'm watching this show, The Leftovers, and that one was created and helmed by one of JJ's buddies. What's his name? Like Lindoff something.
Lindelof.
Something. Yeah, I keep forgetting his name, but he wrote. He was involved. He wasn't involved in the first one, but he was involved in writing the second one, Into Darkness. And The Leftovers is actually a really good show. Like I'm actually very impressed. It has to be the best thing to come out of the JJ branch of creativity. Let's just say. Although I didn't like they also did the Watchmen series, and I didn't like that one at all. But The Leftovers, he was working off of a book or something. It was like, so maybe the source material was just so good that you just had to kind of like work from that. But in any case, that's one thing that was curious to me. But connecting that to the main issue that I have with the newer movies is that some of the casting is problematic. Like Simon Pegg, I love him, and I'm glad he was involved in writing it, but I don't think he should have been Scotty. It's just a bit of a stretch. He doesn't have
I'll chime in without and letting you get back to it, but I feel like when they made the first one, they did a great job with basically with Kirk and Spock and Bones, which is the core, of course, of the whole thing. Yeah. And anyone who's seen original series knows that. Every other character, they just took the most basic aspect of their character and said, who's the most popular person who kind of fits into this?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like John Cho also, I mean, he's fine, but he's just like, oh, he's one of the like young Asian guys that pops up in a lot of movies. Let's just go with him. But
pretty much how I felt.
He doesn't have the Sulu like persona. I think Anton Yelchin of all of them made it work the best.
Yeah.
Like I buy him as Chekhov, even though he's doing the accent and it's
It
not
helps
as
that he's so young that you could assume that his face would morph into what it is in the TV show later.
Yeah, and Zoe Saldana, I almost buy her
She's
as
fine.
well. Like
She's all
she's
right.
fine. She's serviceable. Like she's not as jarring as Simon Pegg and John Cho. And even Carl Urban, like I love him too. But and this is maybe not his fault. It's mostly like him and Simon Pegg, especially in this movie, without getting into spoilers or anything, but they overdo the ticks. Like Simon Pegg, every other word is lassie this, lassie that. It's like you
Yeah.
could have thrown it twice and let it go. It would have been enough. Like, and then Carl Urban is like, damn it, Jim, damn it, man. I'm a doctor. Like, come on, do it once per movie, not 4-6 times. Like,
Well,
because then it
that
just
was
becomes a
was
running joke.
script.
What?
That was probably in the script.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you that they do it too much. I just think that while acknowledging the points you're making, I just think that Carl Urban is like doing a DeForest Kelly impression far better than anybody else is.
Oh yeah. No, that's why I said I prefaced that I think he does a good job as far as the characterization, sort of like Anton Yelchin, but that
Yeah.
the script did a disservice to his character.
Yes,
His and Scotty's when they overdid their famous ticks from the show.
Yeah.
You know.
I also think that it's possible that this is just me allowing baggage in from other things that I've seen him in, but even in this movie where they're not trying to make him look formidable, I just think that Carl Urban has broader shoulders and is just a larger person than DeForest Kelly ever was, you know?
Oh
Like
yeah.
he just seems very scrawny in especially in Wrath of Khan, where he's significantly older, but even back in the show, you know, they're wearing fairly tight fitting, you know, clothing and like these like unitard type things, and like you know, you see Carl Urban and it's like they might try to hide it all they want, that dude's pretty big, you know.
But it shows that he's very talented, that he's able to like
super talented. I
like
wrote a note. I'm just gonna say this now because we're talking about it. I wrote a note. Carl Urban too good for this movie.
too good. No, I mean I feel like Zachary Quinto also pretty much is fairly serviceable. Chris Pine is as well. But if you compare them 1-to-1, I mean like there's no denying Shatner's like suave. And then Leonard Nimoy's like gravitas, and even like I think Carl Urban's the only one that comes the closest like to the original characters like charisma of sorts. But the rest of them, like I mean, like I said, Zoe Saldana, like I mean, she's serviceable just because Uhura generally is mostly a serviceable character. She's not as big as some of those other characters. Like so the shoes are not as big to fill.
Sure.
But Scotty, come on, like that guy was like a character, you know. So like it's what are you gonna do?
I'm just you know, I don't care about this at all. But in this day and age where, you know, where this seems to be the first thing brought up whenever people are casting and stuff like that, I'm kind of surprised that when this first Star Trek movie came out, that there wasn't like an uproar in the Asian community, because I feel like, you know, a lot of Asian people really care about getting the right kind of Asian, you know? I mean, Takai is Japanese. Let's just say what it is, you know. And John Cho, very good actor. I like the man a lot. He's really good. But I mean, you know, he's Korean. You know, I mean, I don't care. I think it works just fine. But I mean, you know, it's usually the kind of thing that these people get really mad about. And when I say these people, I mean people in Hollywood.
Yeah, no, for
Unnecessarily
sure.
mad
Because
about it.
like
Just surprising, you know. That's all I'm saying.
it's because they didn't have a Japanese actor that would fit the bill, so they just went with the closest.
No. They didn't have a Japanese name. They didn't have a household name. Because see, that's what I'm saying.
I mean,
when they set aside or set apart to make this, you know, Star Trek remake, they got their core 3 people. They put a lot of work into casting that, and then they cast the rest of it the way DreamWorks cast their animation. It's like, what name can we put on the poster? They didn't want some awesome, amazing Japanese actor who's age appropriate and looks like he could be a young George Takei. They wanted someone recognizable. And I don't blame them for that. I just think that it's a little hypocritical, is all I'm saying.
Yeah, but at the same time, I understand it. It's tough to cast, like especially like when these like bigger than life characters.
Sure.
But because you definitely don't want to make him not Asian.
Oh no.
But,
I'm not saying that at all. I don't know.
Yeah.
I've always said this. Just to be clear, we already had a whole episode about this stuff. I very firmly believe that all that matters is, can you passably, can you act in a role and be passable? Can people look at it and go, yeah, I believe that? If it's believable and passable, I'm fine. I don't care if you're playing something that is completely different than what you are, just as long as it works. And I just think it's weird that there wasn't an uproar, because there usually is about far lesser things,
Yeah, no, I think Sulu is similar to O'Hara for me. Like, is that the characters are not as big or as memorable, including the actors who played them. They were just serviceable. So, I mean, Sulu had a few moments, like a few episodes here and there where he did some crazy stuff. But still, he was mostly just, just kind of like zen. Both of them, like, it was just very zen on the bridge. They were just like filling in like nice spots. But yeah, like the rest of them, including like Chekhov, it's just like they're just so pronounced, their characterization, that it's very tough to like match them.
I always liked when I think you guys watched Star Trek a lot more than I did, obviously, growing up, but I watched the movies a lot, all of the original 6 movies a lot, except for, of course, that 5th one, which is like hot garbage on a sunny day. But the
second worst Star Trek movie.
I would argue is the worst. But anyway, I was just gonna say that, like, I always thought it was cool that Sulu was eventually given command of his own ship, because what I liked that. And then I remembered when I go back, once things like Netflix and stream various other things became available, where I could go back and rewatch the old shows and stuff. I always thought it was interesting that you'd see a lot of moments where an episode centered around Kirk and Spock, and so one of them would be on a planet, the other one had to go down to help or something like that. You'd see a lot of moments where they'd be like, Mr. Sulu, you have the bridge, you have the con, or something like that, and he'd jump up there in the captain's chair and stuff like that. I think there's even one where they're like, I don't remember if it's a Muck Time or maybe it's Arena. I don't know. One of the old episodes that I actually remembered watching a lot. I remember there was one where he like has to like take control of the ship and leave and like go somewhere or something like that. And I was like, cool. Look at that. It's like setting the groundwork for what's going to come later.
Yeah. I guess we can do the ratings.
Sure.
So so for me, I mean, it was Wrath of Khan, my rating from back when, who knows when, early 2000s or something, was 8. And I think Star Trek Beyond, I would like give it a 7, but mostly because again, for me, 7 is like average, where like I like it enough, it was serviceable. It's not Star Trek the way I like it, but it had moments. It tried, much like Wrath of Khan did, just Wrath of Khan did it better.
I really want to give Wrath of Khan a 9, because I think it's so solid, and it figured out things about Star Trek that I think they hadn't quite figured out yet. And it's just great. I'll get more into that later, because I actually forgot to make a note to mention to comment on what you were talking about earlier. But I don't think I can give it a 9 though. I really, really want to, but I'd just say like 8.5, or just a very, very strong 8. I am very tempted to give it a 9, but no, yeah, like probably 8.5. And then Star Trek Beyond. This was my second time watching it since the theaters. And it was better than I remembered it for sure, like significantly better. But I certainly couldn't go any higher than a 6. I'd probably be tempted to go 5 actually, but I'll just say 6 because I did enjoy it more than I remembered. I just think the ending is stupid.
Okay.
So we'll get into that.
So, with Wrath of Khan, I'll just go a solid 8.5. With Beyond, some background. When I saw this in theaters, I was seeing it with my girlfriend at the time. I'm single now, but
Wah, wah, wah.
and I don't know, we got out of the movie, and my girlfriend at the time was kind of giving me this weird look, and I was kind of curious, and she just said, "I knew all the places of this movie that you hated the most." And like, how's that? Like, you were squeezing my hand so hard whenever you were pissed.
Like a woman in labor.
So, though I will say I agree with Jason. Upon rewatch, I actually liked it more than I did when I was in the theater. But if I hadn't rewatched it, I would probably give it like a 2. Upon rewatch, I think it's more like a 5.
Oh
Yes.
wow, so big gaps
Yeah.
there. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Cool. So I guess anything else before spoilers?
Nothing that can't wait.
Okay. Cool. I would be curious to hear about the ending and then see how Matt got to his rating. But what was about the ending, Jason, that you didn't like?
In Star Trek Beyond?
And Beyond, yeah.
Well, I think that I don't know this for sure. I've never read anything that confirms this or even whatever. Just watching the movie, to me, it feels like it was 2 different scripts that they were trying to figure out, and they decided to just mash bits of it together. And I think it shows because Idris Elba does not need anything really, except for some of that. No, I really don't think he needs much of anything. So he's got a superior space force that's unlike anything they've ever encountered before. And I know Matt has stuff to talk about that because we've talked about it before, and I'll let him go into that with the problem with that whole aspect of it. But just taking the movie for what it is and not going into the subtext of the film, he has a superior force which he can use whenever he wants. When they get stranded on the planet, they discover 2 things. One, that the woman who led them there was lying to them, and 2, that I think it's Sulu and Uhura figure out. They temporarily escape, and they find out that he has been somehow monitoring everything that goes on in that like big giant space station, which is a whole nother thing I have a problem with. That space station is stupid. But anyway, so they say, like he's got to get this weapon off the Enterprise, this chunk of a weapon that he's been trying to assemble for all this time. Every scene that involves that stupid weapon is like from another script. You can just tell, because this guy doesn't need it. It serves no purpose in the movie whatsoever. He like has this fleet of ships that just curb stomps the Enterprise. like no problem whatsoever. If he just wanted to completely annihilate them, he could have done it even faster. He wanted to board the ship and get this weapon from them, which is another thing that doesn't make any sense of how he even knew it was there. They don't even discuss that at all. But you know, in the end, the Enterprise crew is on this crappy little ship, and his Idris Elba, the bad guy's number 2, says, "You go finish the mission. I'll take care of these guys," like a stupid noble sacrifice for a character that has zero development whatsoever. And so Idris Elba takes his whole fleet and leaves. And there's a tiny bit of lip service. They say, oh, because the Enterprise sent a distress call, that most of the fleet that would be around that space station is going to be out, in the nebula trying to like find them or something. They gave them the wrong coordinates or something dumb like that. Okay, maybe there'd be a few more ships, a few fewer ships that he would not have to worry about. But he shows up to the big space station, and they say, like, the attack starts, and there's a line where the guys are looking at their sensors and stuff. They say he's 60 seconds from breaking through the outer shield thing and then being inside the thing, and that's when they show up and save the day. So that means that he didn't need anything. He had enough. Like, what if he had just destroyed the Enterprise, done everything that he was doing, his whole plan, and just showed up there? He could have decimated the whole thing in like a matter of minutes. He doesn't need this stupid super weapon thing. It's just there for a reason to have Kirk and Idris Elba duke it out at the end, after the end of the climax. It's like completely pointless.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I didn't think about it so deeply. I just assumed that there was something to it. Like, because she explains, I think Uhura explains something about that with this weapon, he would be able to do it to multiple places, or like just more effectively or more easily. But
how much more effective does he need to be than his fleet of little ships? They're like incredible.
Sure.
They're unkillable. Like,
no, but apparently this weapon was gonna do the job from the interior, because like those small weapons are good maybe against like
maybe
ships. I don't know. I mean, like, because obviously they did figure it out. They were able to kill off like the coordination between the ships and stuff. So somebody would have figured that out. But this was like a weapon that if you get it to the center of like something, you can just blow it up like from the inside or something.
I guess.
I mean,
sound suddenly travels in space when it's the Beastie Boys.
Yeah.
But,
the sound traveling in space. Well, but it doesn't travel in space though. They've thrown it into their communication, like they transmit it.
It doesn't make any damn sense. But anyway,
transmitting it makes sense. I just like
transmitting it makes sense. But,
they don't have speakers on the Enterprise. The exterior speakers, like they were
could have fooled me.
That was my understanding of that scene, but I understand. I understand that there's like, I'm sure like many of these modern scripts, like it's a little bit too complicated for its own good type of thing.
Matt, why don't you describe why the Idris Elba's fleet of ships is counterintuitive to everything in the movie?
Oh God. I haven't gone on that rant in so long. I kind of forgot what my point was.
I'll help, and you can chime in then. I believe you used to say to me over and over ad nauseum that this movie was pointless and didn't make sense because its entire point that it's trying to make is they really do hammer this home quite a bit in all the conversations with the native girl that they team up with, in all the scenes between Uhura and Idris Elba, in like so many different scenes. His whole point is he used to be a Starfleet officer. He turned away from it because he felt that Starfleet represented something bad, I guess, in society, because it was trying to remove conflict from people's lives by unifying them peacefully together or something like that. And then he has this dumb moment where he goes in the prison cell and he basically threatens to kill Sulu. And so the girl hiding the weapon breaks down, like, like emotionally and goes, no, and it gives him the weapon, and he looks at Uhura and goes, you see, your unity is a weakness, not a strength. There's something stupid like that. And then, of course, that's his whole bag. That's his bag, is that many different cultures and many different small things to get, fighting together are weaker rather than one large thing. And yet his entire strength of his, navy comes from tiny little ships working together as a whole.
Yeah, right. I was grinding my brain thinking about like the logic of the tactics or something like that. But no, I mean, as a story element, like as a metaphor, it's
the exact opposite of what it should.
Right. It's fighting its own. It's eating its own head.
It really should be the big ship from the first one. The one that
Eric Bana
has. If that was Idris Elba's ship, then his whole point would make sense.
Yeah.
I completely didn't even I missed that. Like I thought his point was that peace was not the way to go, and that you need to rule through like power and through like aggression or something.
He does have a thing in there about conflict and how their peace is making them weak.
Makes them weak, yeah.
All these scenes with like the girl, the native girl,
Jayla.
Jayla. She's Sophia something rather. Botella, I think. Yes. All the scenes with her and Scotty and Kirk, there's like moments where she's like, it's impossible, we cannot defeat him, and he says something like, he's like, you're like a little stick, he can snap you, or something like that. He says, but if you put a bunch of sticks together, it's impossible to break them. It's like just all this stupid crap. It's like, it's so on the nose, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I don't know. For some reason that stuff didn't bother me, but I'm not denying that there's flaws to the movie. I could be convinced to review my thing and change it to a 6, but I think what it is like some of it is maybe just being jaded about the first two and trying to just like not overthink it, especially after Wrath of Khan, because like, this is not Star Trek either. I mean, the only thing that's like really like philosophical there is they're like a moment with like Spock says like, the needs of the one, like the many outweighs the needs of the few. But it's not the overall encompassing theme of the movie. It's just like a thing he throws in there, a script moment that like comes back later on. So to me, it's like.
And I also think that's Star Trek philosophy at its worst.
Yeah, it's not as sophisticated a moral dilemma as some of their best stuff. But so I'm like,
I wouldn't say that the movie goes too deep into it, but just throwing it out there, I think there's a little bit of depth to some of the conversations they were trying to have between Kirk, Spock, and McCoy when they first have to watch that top secret video about what Genesis is. They're kind of like discussing the moral dilemmas there of like, should something like this even be attempted? Is it wrong to even try to create life and stuff like that?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, and maybe I missed that. I was also
they didn't. There's not much to miss. They just kind of give it some lip service, but I just wanted to point it out because I think it's something at least.
If they did, then it might like bump up Wrath of Khan a little bit for me, because what I feel like that movie could have been, and maybe that's what it was trying to be, but not all the way. But is the Khan is the result of humans tinkering with science to create something stronger, better, or newer.
Yeah.
And by doing the Genesis project is a version of that only for nature,
Yeah.
of sorts.
Mhm.
And yeah, and whether that's our place to do that, and especially like if it's especially if we sort of like the Frankenstein, like you create this monster, but then you don't see the humanity in it, and you maroon it on a planet,
Yeah.
then you become the monster, not the monster itself. That's like, if there was more of that, like if it's like, I think that's a little bit of like maybe what they were doing with the Khan episode in the show,
Yeah.
but 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 I just feel like there could have been so much more in the movie, but they just didn't focus on that. Like the overall arching thing in the movie itself feels like, it feels like there's the whole thing about the aging thing. That's a big thing. And then there's the whole thing with Savick, the whole thing that she kind of learns from Spock and from Kirk about how, rules are meant to be broken, and that, there is no such thing as a no-win situation. Like there's always got to be a way. Like, you can't stop trying until you die, basically. It's like there's some of that stuff thrown in there, but none of that stuff is like high philosophy sort of ideas. It's just normal action movie, space adventure type of stuff. Borderline Star Wars, not even Star Trek. So that's why, to me, going from that movie straight to Beyond, I was like, this is kind of the same thing, just not as good. Maybe a bit more convoluted, worse characterization, but it's basically like a space adventure movie. Not as good as Star Wars, but but it's serviceable. It's just not. It doesn't have a lot of meat in it. But I felt like Wrath of Khan didn't have a lot of meat in it, except for like the throwaway Moby Dick quote here and there. So it's like, to me, it's like they're not that dissimilar from each other.
Yeah.
I need you. We don't need to go in this right now, but I just want to throw this out there. If I'm just so surprised that both of you being Trekkies are like, or at least Gil anyway is basically talking about Wrath of Khan and seemingly saying that he likes it significantly less than I do, and so I'm like curious as to where you place the rest of them.
Which one's the Star Trek movies?
All of them, yeah.
It's been so long since I've seen them. Maybe Matt should start, and then I can recall them more.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to do all of them off the top of my head, but First Contact is my favorite. Then probably Wrath of Khan and Undiscovered Country. Yeah, The Voyage Home. That's I'd probably insert. You know what? I don't hate the motion picture as much as most people. I would bump that up a lot. And here's the
motion
thing.
picture, the one with God thing.
No,
that's
the
Voyager.
Frontier.
That was the Final Frontier.
The motion picture was the first one that was trying to do like 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Oh,
emphasis on the word "trying."
I really love The Voyage Home. I know that's my mom's favorite and always has been. It's also kind of funny that Stephen the two parents on Seventh Heaven were in Star Trek, but and one turned out to be a pedophile. But okay, so I'm just gonna. I'm not gonna list off the rest of them, but I got to bring up Nemesis because Nemesis is like it's a really good example of what Gil is talking about too, in that it is laser focused on an idea. Like it's basically a 2-hour Star Trek movie, a Star Trek episode. I mean, the entire thing is built around a television kind of formula of like having an avatar of yourself or having an offshoot of yourself, and just wondering, like questions of free will, questions of like, what actually makes me me outside. Is there something innate about me that would make me different if I had been brought up in different circumstances, or if I had lived his life, would I be him, or if I just
Nature
had
versus nurture.
right, so on and so forth. Like it was a laser focused movie on that philosophy. It just wasn't very good. And I think a lot of I think most of it was, well, pretty much all of it was an execution. I mean, and there were a lot of good decisions made. I mean, they cast Tom Hardy as Patrick Stewart's clone as the Picard clone in that movie, and Tom Hardy has been great since the beginning. I mean, like he's freaking fantastic in that movie. They just had some really bad dialogue. They had a few bad scenes. They tried to, tie in a really bad action sequence at the beginning of the movie that looked like shit. The space battle was pretty cool, and it had a lot
It's
of
derivative.
implications. But it was fine. It was at least kind of cool. Like
It was just them aping Star Trek Six's space battle.
correct, but it was at least fun. But yeah, I mean, there were a lot of good elements to that movie. They just made a lot of really bad decisions. This is why you should never let editors direct anything.
That's a good point.
But anyway, those are my thoughts.
I just sent you guys the list of all 14 Star Trek movies with them listed, in red and blue. Blue being the even numbered good movies, and red being the horrible odd numbered movies. But anyway, yeah, the if I had to list them, which I had done before this, it's not like I just pulled this out of my butt or something. This is something I had written down probably 5-6 years ago or something like that. And I looked at them right as we were getting on right now, and I was like, yeah, still pretty much checks out. I would just put it as Wrath of Khan is number 1, Undiscovered Country is number 2, and First Contact number 3. So all 3 of the same top ones that Matt had. Just he just puts First Contact first, and I put it third. But other than that, pretty much the same. Then, of course, Galaxy Quest, which is by far one of the best Star Trek movies ever made. And from there, Voyage Home, I definitely think is the next best one. But after that, there's a big drop, I feel. And I put the JJ Star Trek at 6, but honestly, between that one, Insurrection, Search for Spock, and this one Beyond that we're talking about tonight, all 4 of those I could easily shift around if anyone were to make a certain argument about which one's better than other ones. Like I feel like the ideas in Insurrection are better than its execution. I think that the execution in Star Trek, in the JJ Star Trek, is better than its actual story, and what it did was problematic, to be sure. The Search for Spock, I think, is just a bad movie, but I totally agree that if you are watching like a little trilogy, it makes a really good second installment. If you're watching Wrath of Khan, Search for Spock, Voyage Home, that's like a nice tight little trilogy that you can watch, and it's very good at bridging those 2 very good movies together. And you get to see Christopher Lloyd as a Klingon. That's kind of cool too. And then Beyond, like the one we're talking about now, it's got some good stuff in it. It's got some really stupid stuff in it too, but it's not horrible. But then there's a huge drop below that where they all, in my opinion, are pretty much terrible. And that's where you get number 11, which would be the very first one ever made, Star Trek: The Motion Sickness. And then you get the 12th one, Star Trek Nemesis. and then you get, or not the 12th one, but the number 12 on my list. Sorry. And then Into Darkness is just horrible, and Star Trek V: The Search for God, or as I like to call it, Star Trek V: That Shall Not Be Named. That horrifically bad movie.
5.
Yeah, it's a pointless film.
Final Frontier.
Yeah, it's awful.
Yeah, I have such a like vague memory of all these movies. If I'm not mistaken, at some point I did see them all one by one because I was back in the 2000s. I was making my way through the original series, and then I did all the movies, and then I started doing like TNG, and then I saw the TNG movies, and some of them I saw in theaters, of course. The TNG.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think the ones that stick out in my mind is there was one good one, and I guess it is like it's probably the Undiscovered Country, but
number 6.
Yeah, like because that's the one you're saying is one of the good ones.
I think it's my second favorite.
Yeah, I might even like it more than Wrath of Khan. And I totally get the appeal of the tongue and cheekness of the fourth one, The Voyage Home.
Yeah.
And I really don't recall. I remember like you're saying the Final Frontier is the one with the godlike figure, so I'm assuming that's that. But then you said like the motion picture also has like a 2001 like an alien encounter. So I don't know. But I maybe someday in life I'll revisit them. As far as the TNG ones, I have a similar issue with that one too. Like First Contact is solid. I mean, you can't go wrong with the Borg.
It's really good.
But I also have like a soft spot for Star Trek Generations. Like, yes, it was doing a lot of like fan service and nostalgia, playing on nostalgia and stuff. But also, I really like Malcolm
McDowell.
Malcolm McDowell in that movie, and there's just something about like Shatner, like the two best captains.
Yeah, I mean that's
Shatner
what you're there for, right?
And,
you want to see their interaction. It was smart of them to do it. I think it's a sin for them to make Generations and to come up with this really good idea for how we're going to just temporarily have Kirk live in that universe and not let him ever get to see the new Enterprise. That's just not right. He needs to like set foot on the bridge, he needs to just sort of like get to live it for just a minute. And obviously that involves an entirely different story, an entirely different script. I just think that at the end of the day, it's nice that that you get the most important thing, which is Kirk and Picard talking and living to get, living in the same moment together, but, and then, going on a little adventure together too, with high stakes and everything. But I just feel like that was something that movie needed, like I really feel like for all the people who loved Next Generation and loved that Enterprise that was to them was the Enterprise, how are you going to make that movie and not have Shatner walk around on that for a bit,
Yeah, I can see that. It would be more fan service. Maybe they said like, we can't do that. That's too much.
Maybe
we've already taken too much like political capital here. But yeah, and Insurrection, I mean, that's, to me, it's one of the most telling one to my theory about the issue with these movies is that it is basically like a so-so Star Trek episode. Like it's definitely what an episode looks like. It's just that it's longer and it's bigger. But it is mostly, it feels like a TV movie almost of sorts. Like if there was a Star Trek TV movie, this would be it. It just wasn't like the scope wasn't big enough, or the approach wasn't precise enough, or I don't know what it was. Like, it's not to say that the only way a Star Trek movie could work is if it was bigger and with a lot of like action. I think you could make a movie like, why is it that like a movie like Ex Machina and Moon and some other ones can be small but extremely cinematic? But Star Trek is not allowed to do that. I understand, like it's a franchise, like it needs to be a moneymaker. But what's wrong about making like
do you want it to be big or do you want it to be small? Which one do you
I
want?
want it to be small. I want it to be like to find a way to like have an adventure in space that's more focused about. I mean, again,
Isn't that what
it's
Wrath of Khan is?
but not so much like because I would say something like like obviously 2001 is a big one, but like Interstellar. I'm trying to find examples like of like big action movies that also had like a through line of something philosophical. Even The Dark Knight, tried to do that. Like the movies that can be big but still have a lot to say, and and can deal with like heavy concepts. I know it's not easy, but it's doable. I mean, Spielberg had a few as well, but even for Spielberg, it was like very tough. It's not very easy to do. So I understand why. It's I feel like obviously Lord of the Rings is a big example too, but that's like a very good source material. Um, to do something epic that still has a lot of like mythology and philosophy behind it, those are rare, but whenever like somebody nails it, obviously Dune can be one as well.
No, I think they've thrown all the philosophy out of that already.
Yeah, exactly, because you see it's tough. I mean, to me, like the Dune movie, I don't know how the second one part is going to be, but it's to me it looks great. It looks like really
it looks
good.
incredible.
But
it's
I
so
just
beautiful.
but it's just like a lot of mouths moving and talking, and I'm not getting. There's no overarching concept
They've
philosophy.
taken all the heady stuff out of it. It's so sad.
Yeah, so it's very tough to pull off. I'm just like if Denis, like if one of the top two filmmakers, like basically it's him and Nolan, who else can you expect to do like a big science fiction movie on a huge scale and actually succeed? Those two guys pretty much. Like it's a very short list. Like even Spielberg, I think I'm trying to think. I mean, he sort of succeeded with like we discussed like AI to some degree for sure, and also a Minority Report. Yeah, like those movies exist, but they're far and few between.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's tough. It's tough. I don't know. Maybe there is a way to do a Star Trek movie that's small, but I mean, some of those like episodes, like it's the one I don't know. A memorable one to me is like I always like the one with when they torture Picard, the one with the fingers.
4 lights.
What?
There are 4 lights.
That was a good episode.
So.
That was a Chain of Command, I believe.
Chain of Command.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, some of the best episodes are like what Tapestry, The Inner Light, in DS9, The Visitor, Past Tense, DS9. I mean, those weren't huge like space battles, adventures, so on and so forth. They were, I mean, especially with The Visitor. I mean, 50% of the episode was just 2 people in the room.
So just to be clear, are you wishing for more bigger Star Trek or more smaller Star Trek? I'm trying to understand.
No, what I'm looking for is that, and maybe this is not possible, but that's the point. Like when Matt names these episodes, it's like they needed to do 100 episodes in order to have like 5, 10 amazing one, and there's like 30, 40 very good ones, probably better than most of these movies, but these like very pinpointed like concepts. Like for example, like
so you're talking more about the concept rather than the scope of the film.
In some ways, like because for example, like the like what's the most famous Star Trek episode like in the original series is like the first one's the menagerie something.
Sure.
The allegory of the cave. Like we basically took head on, let's take Plato's concept and just put it into a TV show. And it's with like goofy people in space with color suits. And you're like, yeah, this is really goofy and it's very campy, but it's got this like very big idea about like, if you found out that life wasn't real, would it still be worth living if you were happy and comfortable? It's like literally, we forgot the big one, Matrix. I mean, Matrix was like a big science fiction movie that dealt with a big idea and executed it well. But then they couldn't repeat it with the second and third one. That's how difficult it is to like do these like, very smart science fiction ideas and nail them on a big scale.
Yeah, that's a whole nother discussion of what went wrong with those sequels.
Yeah, but the idea
I would argue that the sequels had the idea that they fumbled the ball, but that's a long discussion.
Yeah, and there's some interesting like Braga episodes too that like I know a lot of his stuff was very gimmicky, but there's some interesting like, loop and time travel episodes that like are fairly interesting and sophisticated. Something like that could be interesting. I mean, like, Christopher Nolan would be a shoo-in for something like that. I was curious to know like what was I guess I can look it up online if there's any info about it, like what idea Tarantino had for his like Star Trek that never happened. If like he was gonna bring something new. If anything, I'm assuming it was gonna be some sort of revenge story. but who knows? Maybe he was like a Star Trek fan and he actually had some interesting concept.
Tarantino said that it was going to be a time travel concept.
I'm almost glad.
Yeah, so I mean, time travel. I know it's been done to death, but I mean, there's not too much time travel in the Star Trek movies. So if you do it really well. I mean, there's some, but not a ton.
Oh, I mean, given what 14 movies having it take place in Star Trek Episode 4 in First Contact is actually a pretty relatively large percentage when it comes to a franchise.
Well, I guess I was gonna say like think about it like before these new J.J. Abrams, the Kelvin timeline came out. In 10 movies, they had done it twice. And both times it with really stupid means. Like I mean, I think First Contact is better at least, but it's like I find I love First Contact. As I said, it's my third favorite one out of all of them. It's the first one that I saw in theaters. I love that movie, but my goodness, do they just like blow past the time travel stuff like it doesn't even matter. They're just like, oh, look, the Borg figured out how to time travel. Follow them. Okay. And then they do it. And it's like, yay. Are there any consequences? Nah, we're just going to replicate what they did and we'll just magically get back to where we were. Okay. Does that change the universe? Nah, we forgot how to do it now. Like, it's like, what? What do you mean? There's just a throwaway line of dialogue. I don't know if it's Riker or one of them is just goes, okay, sir, we've been able to replicate what the Borg did. We're going to go right back to where we were. Yay.
Fair criticism.
But that really is my biggest problem with the movie. Like, I love that movie. The fourth one, what is it? They're going to go through warp drive around the sun. Like, what is this? Like Superman? Like, I mean, come on. This is so stupid. Don't get me wrong. I love that movie too. You just have to turn your brain off because the time travel is so dumb. I mean, the TV show time traveled all the time, but I felt like those episodes usually had like a thing, right? Wasn't there like I don't know, like Q or something, like there was something involving some unexplainable thing that made them time travel rather than we're going to go backwards around the sun or something stupid like that.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess I have to give the Jar Jar movies a little bit of credit in that.
Oh, that one's got time travel too. I forgot about that.
Right. Yeah. The first one had time travel, but the I mean, Star Trek doesn't exactly have a perfect track record of being perfectly science fiction and actually like laying all these things out and really explaining things. And also, yeah, I mean, if you can do time travel like that, like in the way that they portrayed in Star Trek 4, why don't they just do it all the time?
Yeah.
You know,
Why don't you build a ship that can do that more safely? Because they almost like, damage the ship in the process. It's like, I mean, once you go back and you know it could work. It's like from that
Yeah.
point on, let's build a ship that's perfect, that's purpose built for this.
Yeah, but still, like, I mean, I think that the Jar Jar Abrams movies go a little bit further with that in terms of like, I, like Star Trek Into Darkness. The idea that they had that there's like a transwarp beaming device,
Oh my god!
and
Oh my god!
not only is there a transwarp beaming device that can beam you from Earth to Kronos, like across solar systems,
Yeah,
but it's the size of a backpack.
yeah.
And I
Isn't
mean,
that a lot further than a solar system too?
well, I said across solar systems.
Oh, systems. Yes. Yes.
I might have not pronounced that S at
No,
the
no.
end, but
I think I just understood it wrong. Yeah, I get
yeah,
what you're saying.
several solar systems.
Yeah.
I mean, like, and Scotty, Scotty, like, Scotty produces this thing and talking about it almost like it's like something that he knew about. Like this isn't something that was like buried deep in Starfleet, archives or like a top secret thing. Scotty knew what he was talking about when it was like a transport beaming device, and I mean like in DS9 and in Voyager in the original timeline, they're I mean, transwarp is something that like only the Borg and species 8472 can do. Like,
I didn't know that they could do that.
yeah, I mean, like it was like the weird thing that oh wow, the Borg can do transwarp. Species 8472 can do transwarp. Wow, that's incredible. We don't have that technology. That all takes place way after the Kirk Spock Scotty
Yeah,
era.
like 100 years or something, right?
Yeah. And I mean, I know that Nero going back in time changed the timeline and all that stuff, but it didn't change, like, it, it couldn't have changed the development of technology that much.
I think we can all agree that Into Darkness movie is full of problems.
Yeah. Also,
Yeah.
one thing that I kind of enjoyed and disliked about Beyond was the fact that they had like a rudimentary universal translator.
Oh yeah.
And that's kind of a nice touch. They hadn't used that in the first two movies theoretically.
Yeah.
But still it doesn't make a whole lot of sense that like I mean even in the first scene and Beyond with Kirk with like all those little creatures and everything, like why they would all be speaking English perfectly and without functioning universal translators or something like that or anything like that. But I mean, in Star Trek canon, at least, when you talk about at least the previous TV shows, Enterprise was a prequel to the original series, and they did the same thing with like a rudimentary universal translator, and they had actual episodes where they were having problems with it and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So I mean, Nero going back in time doesn't change the development of the universal translator. So if even if you're going with the Kelvin timeline, okay, this is different. The universal translator was still invented before Nero came back in time.
Yeah.
But how much of a sorry, how much of a nerd am I coming off as right
A little
now?
too much. A little too much. No.
Okay.
I'm just joking. I
I do find it amusing that of all the Star Trek movies, the only one that won an Oscar was the 2009 Star Trek for
what did it
makeup.
win? Oh, for makeup. Okay.
Makeup.
As I was watching this one, Star Trek Beyond, I was noticing a couple of funny things, and you guys already touched on some of it. That I was feeling like it was kind of derivative of the older Star Wars movies in different ways, and you guys already talked about how they kind of aped the birthday scene for Kirk and between Kirk and Bones, and only this time they're drinking some sort of Glenfiddich, it looked like. But and then I thought it was kind of silly that that the big reveal at the end of Star Trek Beyond is the same for the bad guy as it is in Insurrection, where you've got these creepy looking, weird, inhuman characters, and then at the end you find out, oh, they're just basically humans. Like he's a Starfleet, human. From Earth. He just has been doing this thing to prolong his life, and now he looks like this. The same exact thing they did in Insurrection. They're just the kids that ran off from that planet of humans. That they're like stretching their faces to look young again and stuff like that. But the one that made me laugh, especially because I wasn't the one who thought of it, but I was watching the movie with a friend, and um, at the end of Beyond, it's so stupid, but they're flying the ships through the space station areas, and they're like underwater, kind of. It's
Yeah.
really dumb. Um, there's a moment where, like, at the end, the three bad guy ships are flying, and they use some line of dialogue where Spock tells Kirk, it is impossible for us to stop all three of them at once, or something like that. And Kirk just goes, I got this, or something. And he tells them, find a space such and such where we can do this. And their solution is to breach the ship up through a lake or something, and then they smash into it. And my friend goes, oh, look, it's the whales again. It made me laugh. But
Well, there was like a thing. I felt like it was a bit humorous, I guess, like the ending and Beyond, that the solution they come up with to stop the little ships that were like
The
trying to
music
get
thing?
the word. No, not the music, but when he got the schematics for the space station, and then what they did is they used the whatever Frontier, the ship that they found that they were flying.
Yeah.
They use it as a bug swatter. They pulled out of the water, and then
Yeah.
the small ship smacked into them. Sort of like a swatter, what you do with
Yeah.
bugs. Because
Yeah.
the whole thing for them was like they were a
bugs.
swarm of bees. Yeah, those little
bees.
ships.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, like that's something. But again, everything was like just slightly a bit too overdone.
Yeah. Did you guys want to talk about the awesome things in Wrath of Khan?
The James Horner music.
The music is very good.
Yeah, I mean, Star Trek between Jerry Goldsmith and James Horner. Holy crap! May they both rest in peace.
Mm-hmm. I think the costume changes was a really huge plus.
Oh yeah, the whole burgundy.
Well, just the having more complex costumes that looked more realistic than. I mean, I don't blame any of the TV shows for putting them in pretty basic tunic type things, because you just need it to look not like Earth, and you need it to be simple because it's a TV show and you need to keep the budget down, and I get it, but the jump from the TV show to the first Star Trek movie, the Motion Sickness, is like the same uniforms, basically. And then you get to the Wrath of Khan, and suddenly it's like, oh, look, they're wearing space age clothing that actually looks like it's clothing. It looks functional. It actually looks like it serves a purpose. You know?
Like a uniform.
Yeah. Even
it's more
the stuff,
presentable.
even the stuff that the scientists are wearing, you know, like the coats they have and stuff like that, it looks functional. You know, it looks like it's something that really might exist, you know, or something. But yeah, I don't know. I've always felt, jumping ahead here, I've always felt that the two of the best scenes in Wrath of Khan is when they get to the Regular One space station and they expect to find Khan there, and it's like really creepy. You know, there's like this whole long, prolonged moment of them like searching, and you've got Uhura trying to like reach them, and they're not answering her because they're not sure if anyone's waiting for them around a corner, you know. And they find the dead bodies and stuff like that. I mean, it was I always thought that scene was really good. But obviously I think the most the best one, of course, being the with that little sand armadillo.
Yeah,
I don't think I've seen this movie in 10 years. I know I've seen it on DVD before because I have the DVD and I watched it a couple of times, but I think this might be the first time I'd seen this on a really big TV with, like, you know, on a Blu-ray player that was upscaling the DVD and everything. And I was very much expecting this thing to look stupid. And this little armadillo, which is clearly a hand puppet, but a great hand puppet. I mean, this thing looks fantastic. The little thing with the little jaws, the little pincher jaws, and he's got to like peel the little babies off of its little like segmented back and everything. It's like, looks fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
and then, of course,
also,
just the visceral, the throwing them in the helmets and then putting them on them and everything.
Yeah, that was like pretty scary. I think also I appreciated the pacing of that movie. That like there's a confidence to that movie where like we're gonna take it slow, like we're gonna you know, or like when they're like stuck on that by the Genesis cave or something.
Yeah, the geofront.
And Kirk is like, is there something to eat? It's
Yeah.
like, you know, he's like,
not just that, not just because you're right. He does say that, and then on top of that, they double down because isn't that? I could be wrong. I think that's the scene right after they're talking about eating and food and everything. They also have a thing where that's where Savick talks to him and Bones, and he's like, "What's on your mind?" You know, or something like that. And she says like the Kobayashi Maru, and then that's when, you know, Bones comes in and reveals the whole thing where he's like, "You're talking to the only one who's ever beat that thing." Yeah. They have like a whole conversation, you know, like it's not even about the Genesis or anything like that. They're just like talking.
Yeah, exactly. There's a little bit like Wrath of Khan has a little bit of Tarantino in it in that sense, where it's like taking its time and like it's building its scenes, and it is a revenge story of sorts. And there is something about like it definitely, like, you know, for any audience that didn't see the TV show or something, just watching this in a movie theater is like, if you want to get why, you know, why like Kirk is so charismatic and all that, is like you see it, like you definitely see it there. Is like, oh yeah, this is why he's legendary, because the guy just like he's so cocky, but he's got good reasons to be.
His performance too, not just, I mean, I totally agree with what you're saying, but his performance of that character is so good in that movie. Like, I mean, I don't know who else could pull it off, because I mean, he's sitting there, he's dropping these dramatic pauses that you could drive a semi truck through, and yet it works. You know, like all that stuff where he's on the little comm and he's talking to Khan and he's goading him, you know, and everything. It's like, it's so fascinating.
Yeah, and there's something unique about that character, like, and it's because of Bones and Spock that it works. Because if he was just like arrogant and irredeemable, like it just wouldn't work. But it's because Spock and Bones just shit all over him all the time in their own different ways. It's like, yes, give it to that fucker. It's like, I love the guy, but somebody needs to put him in his place every once in a while. And they both do it in different ways. So it's something like really works there. Like, where at least like what shows through is that what was the appeal of the show. And maybe it dropped some of the campiness, like it toned that down to a more bearable level.
Yeah.
So that's what I'll give Wrath of Khan, is that like it really hits the right notes tone wise.
Well, I think I know that earlier you were focusing on the ideas that you felt were missing and stuff like that. But I mean, to give credit where credit is due, I mean, I think Ricardo Montalban is a more substantial villain, than anything I can remember in the TV shows. I mean, you guys have watched them multiple times more than me. But I mean, I think that the woman who plays the Borg Queen was really good in First Contact, but you don't ever see her in the show. That was like a big deal when they were like, oh, they call them drones and stuff like that. But at some point there has to be a queen, right? Like that was never in the show. And even in the movies too, like if we look at all, 13 of these movies, I'm trying to think of a villain that's as good. He's just got so much going for him. He's so awesome.
Yeah, maybe that's a bit of the nemesis thing, but at the same time, I don't know. It's like when you think about that premise, like why would they be as sophisticated as they are? I know that they're supposed to be superhuman intelligence wise and whatnot, but I don't know. It's also weird that like only him and one other guy speaks in the whole group.
I never noticed that until this movie. I was like, God, his son is the only one, really. Wow. I kept waiting for one of those girls to say a line, and it's like every bit of intelligence he needs to hear on the bridge is all being delivered by his son.
Yeah.
And
you feel like they're all idiots.
His poor son is like, he's so smart. He's trying to get his dad to not chase that whale, like he's like, we got everything, Ishmael. Dad. He is. I feel so bad for that son. I mean, if you watch Space Seed, you know that the mom and him, she kind of betrayed them a bit, and she ran off. She chose to run off with Khan and everything, but there's something romantic about that, like he's superhuman and she falls in love with him and whatever, he takes the hot blonde from the future and marries her, and then that's what that boy is the result of that, and everything. But that poor kid probably had to, grow up, more or less without his mom, and he just idolized the dad. They all, obeyed him without question and everything, and at the end, he's got all the right answers. That kid is trying his best. And like Khan is just not having it, and everyone else is a mute. They're mute.
Yeah, and genetics. The thing that definitely, and the thing that didn't age at all, like, well, is his haircut.
Which one?
The Khan's, like, the whole Banks and like.
I think he's
just
working.
Doesn't work for me.
I think those bangs and the big rubber chest. I think it all works great.
I don't know. It's so dated for me.
It's funny. I'll just bring this up real quick. Matt just mentioned online today. I think he was just getting his brain in the right place for Star Trek or something. But he mentioned how he can't watch this movie. Right? You can't watch Wrath of Khan without crying at the Spock scene, right, or something like that.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree with you. That's a great scene. It's so well acted. It's so good and everything. But I'll tell you, I get a little choked up about Scotty's nephew. I mean, he's a kind of a little. that scene when they're doing the inspection and he
right.
he actually
Or who
says
stands
something to
up to
Kirk.
Kirk.
I was
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, you better be glad that Arlie Ermy isn't here. He would he's talking about speaking before being spoken to or something like that. It's like, what are you doing, kid? Don't just shut your mouth, But when it's funny because that leads me to one of the negative things about this movie, and it's so telling that this is such a small thing. It's really not a big deal, but people like to talk about plot holes and ham sandwiches and stuff like that. And I think one of the perfect examples of a ham sandwich is in this movie. It's like the initial attack where the what's the ship that Khan's on? The Reliant or something like that?
Yeah, the Reliant.
The Reliant. When the two ships attack each other and they really mess up the Enterprise bad, they catch them by surprise. They got all the rookies on the ship and everything, At the end of the battle, they managed just barely to get away, not even to win, just to get away. And they're like, and I think there's a line where Kirk just says, "Okay, let's see how bad everything is." And they turn, and the doors open, and Scotty is holding his nephew charred to a crisp, sitting there in his arms, and it's like, oh my gosh, it's so effective. But then the 10th time you watch the movie, you're like, thinking about it as the movie's done, and you're like, why did he go to the bridge?
Yeah, exactly.
It's such a ham sandwich. It's like it's just economic filmmaking. I get it. I understand. I mean, you can't, you don't want to throw a whole nother scene in there. It'd be ridiculous. Just throw it in at the end. You don't question it in the moment. It's powerful, especially because they follow it up with that moment where he touches his, he reaches up and grabs his shirt, and all the blood gets on Kirk's shirt and everything. Such a great scene. But what's he doing? What is Scotty doing?
Well, I mean, it's not in Scotty's character at all. I mean, what kind of person would be like, "Hey, I'm just gonna go to the bridge to show you what I've lost, real quick." I'm actually kind of trying to figure out that character in my head. What kind of a character will you have on a show?
I mean, obviously the reality of it would have been that they rush down some corridor, they get to sickbay, and as they're standing there in the doorway, Scotty runs down the opposite hall, and they're confronted with him or something like that. But that involves a whole nother scene, and it messes up the pacing of it and everything like that.
Yeah, but yeah, no, you're right. My brain collapsed this time around. But
Like a quick question for Beyond before we wrap up. Did you have a moment as you're I don't know why, but I thought that when they were doing the whole duel in the end, that that there was gonna be a moment, and I don't know if they didn't go for it because they thought it would be too obvious, but there was gonna be a moment when Krell, whatever the character, Idris, that he sees how much how hard Chris Pine is trying to save these people, that it kind of wins him over. It's like, oh, maybe I was wrong all along. Maybe I shouldn't have harbored this hate. Maybe it was just a coincidence that Starfleet didn't find me on this deserted planet. Maybe I just it was all in my mind, and much like Moby Dick, much like Ahab, trying to find the whale. I guess that's a running thing through Star Trek movies, but yeah, I don't know. There was a moment where he was jumping up to get to where he is, and I thought he was gonna help him pull the lever.
Yeah. Oh, it totally looks like that's what's about to happen. I wonder if they filmed that at one point and were like, nah, this is dumb or something.
It's nah, that's gonna be too cliche for 2016 or something.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm just curious because because that was to me in that movie, if you want to talk about dilemmas and ideas, it's a guy that just harbored this hate towards Starfleet and everything, or whatever version of Starfleet was when he was alive, or when he was serving, and feeling that they've abandoned him, and that's why he wants to avenge, much like Khan to some degree. only like he doesn't like ever get it. Like he doesn't get it that he's completely like just, you know, like that even though he's very very old because he found some cure to death. I don't know, this whole the transformation and whatnot. That like with all his years, like he hasn't gained the wisdom that hate
Yeah.
doesn't help. Like that aggression, that fighting, that it would have been nice. It would have been interesting if they had attempted to like build towards that. Like that a person that like was a soldier and only knew his war and he's obsessed with it, that eventually he would realize that like he was wrong and that he never got that until he saw someone trying so hard to keep the peace,
Mm.
to save a place that's essentially a peaceful place where people come on vacation for, which is the antithesis of like a soldier who's like out fighting wars
Yeah.
left and right. I don't know. Like there's ideas there. There's like, it's all there, people. Like if only like you tried harder, like maybe you'll be able to like catch these ideas. But it just feels like, yeah, in the writing process, they're like, no, but that's not captivating enough, or that's like a cop out, or that's too obvious. It almost feels like the ping pong they were playing with the Star Wars, the new trilogy, where it's
Mm.
like, no, but she can't be uh Luke's daughter, and she can't be Obi-Wan's. Like, so
Yeah.
well, like what's the far left field thing? Oh, like Palpatine. It's like it's. But is that really like what makes the most sense story wise? Even if somebody were to guess it ahead of time, but is that the correct ending or not? That's what really matters.
Well, with Star Wars, I think we can all agree that was not the correct ending.
Yeah,
No,
it's problematic. It's just, it's really
That's being extremely generous.
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. The Rise of Skywalker was the first Star Wars movie that I walked out of and just said, "I'm just never going to watch this again."
You mean at the end of the movie? You didn't walk out in the middle of it or anything?
Oh no, I walked out at the end, yes,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I
I
watched
just
the
wanted
entire
to clarify.
movie. But yeah,
Um,
I never walk out of a movie.
I
Yeah, me
have once or
neither.
twice, but I was gonna say, I this is just something kind of about Wrath of Khan, but also kind of just about all of these movies. But I didn't know this for the longest time, and after somebody told me this, I have always gone back and looked at these movies a little differently. But I find it interesting that, like, so I don't have anything against what's her name? Christy Alley, I think, right? Plays Savick.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Yeah, Christy
Chris,
Alley. I think it's one of her better performances, probably, but I don't think she's a very good Vulcan. I mean, you got her in these scenes right next to Spock, and he's just pulling off the Vulcan so much better than she is, you
mhm.
know.
And he's
And
half full.
exactly. I read somewhere that she's supposed to be half also, but I don't know
Um,
if she is. They didn't make it very clear, so you know. But anyway, yeah, he's only half Vulcan, and he pulls it off so much more than she does. And then you've got a different actress, I believe, right? Isn't Search for Spock has Savick, but it's like not the same actress, I think.
Uh,
Let me look real quickly here at
what?
IMDb. The character Savick, the one that Kirstie
uh,
Alley plays.
Sex in the City. She was in Sex in the City. I know that.
No, 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 no,
You
no.
talking about the actress or the
Yeah,
character?
no, you're thinking of the other movie, because that's where I was getting to next. Her name was Robin Curtis.
Oh,
In the
oh,
third one,
no,
it's yeah, no, no, no. You're getting to my next point. Actually, you're
okay.
jumping ahead. Um, yeah, Robin Curtis played Savick in the third one, and I
Oh,
don't
yeah,
think she has a
I
ton
jumped
of
to the
lines.
sixth. Yeah.
Yeah, I know, I know. Well, that's what I was getting at is I didn't know this, but maybe that's why Matt said that right now because he knew about this already. But uh, I want to say it was my friend Steven, I'm not sure, but somebody told me that at some point in time that there was like this idea. You know how the same director, was it Nick something
Nicholas
Nick
Meyer.
Myers, yeah, did the two really good ones, the Wrath of Khan and Undiscovered Country, the number 6. Yeah, so
Yeah.
2 and 6 were both done by that same director. Um, in 6, you've got Kim Cattrall playing a Vulcan, and she's on their side and everything. And there's that big giant conspiracy, about like who is going to betray them and everything. And it ends up being, Kim Cattrall and everything. And she does a very good Vulcan. She's like really pretty damn good in that movie. She's aside from
Yeah.
just being really sexy, she's also just playing a Vulcan really well. She looks like she has no emotions the whole time. And it's really good. But I guess at some point in time in the story process, the idea was that was supposed to be Savick or something. And and that just makes my brain swim when I start thinking about that. I'm like, wait a minute. Oh my gosh. Can you imagine if you had the same actress in all 3 movies playing the same character in all 3 movies? Because they changed the character. Obviously, it's not supposed to be Savick in 6. But if you had done that, imagine how powerful that would have been. This is the character we got to know in Wrath of Khan. We got to know more in Search for Spock. And considering what 6 is about the treaty between the Klingons and that this is the woman who was present on the planet when Kirk's son was killed by Klingons. They murder him in front of her, and she has to tell him over the comm what just happened, and then all of that stuff is used against him in the conspiracy, in number 6, the big plot and everything. It's all used against him. They use his personal log where he says, I can never trust Klingons ever again. They killed my son and all this stuff like that. If that was the same character and had been played by the same actress, I mean, like, no one would have seen that coming. It would have been incredible. But, it wasn't meant to be. I don't know. I actually would have loved it if Kim Cattrall played it in all 3 of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Probably too young in the... Wrath of Khan, she wasn't too young back then. No.
Let me see. Let's see. Wrath of Khan. What year was that? 82?
82.
And so, let's see. Kirstie Alley was what? Let's see. She was born in 51, so she would have been like 30, probably, when they were filming it.
Oh, Cattrall? Yeah, so...
No, Kirstie Alley. I mean,
Kirstie Alley.
She's only 5 years younger. I don't know. Maybe it would have worked. Maybe not. Hard to say.